2. So a very warm welcome everyone this afternoon to our Best Me in 45 Eat Well for Less webinar. I'm Michelle, I'm from the Healthy Workplaces programme here today with my colleague Justine, who will be monitoring the chat for me. We're running this Eat Well for Less session to mark Health and Nutrition Week. So just a disclaimer to say that we're not health and nutrition experts, but we're public health practitioners and just sharing some general information with you in this session, particularly related to improving nutrition in the sort of highlighted cost of living that we're going through at the moment. So we won't be going into any specific health conditions or diets, but we will share information where you can find out more. We'll give you some links at the end where you can find further information if you need to. So during the session, please do feel free to ask questions in the chat or share any healthy eating on the budget tips that you found useful as we go along. At the end of the session, Justine will pop a link in the chat for our 2-minute satisfaction survey. So please don't rush off if you can help it at the end, and just give us a couple of minutes of feedback. They really help us to shape these sessions for future use. And any topics you'd like to see sort of put on either at lunchtime or a time of day that's suitable. As I said, we are recording this session, so if you don't mind, when we get to interactive bits, you can unmute yourself if you don't mind being in the recording, but otherwise just use the chat function. That's absolutely fine. So just a short bit of housekeeping before we get into the proper content, so to speak. So for those of you who don't know, the Medway Healthy Workplaces programme is a workplace wellbeing scheme. So you probably signed on to that through your organisation, or you may have found us on the Better Medway training portal. Either way, that's fine, you're absolutely welcome. As I said, we'll be using the chat function, the small speech bubble sign on the control bar. Please do stay on mute during the session. Unless we ask you to unmute and join in. Remember the feedback survey, nip to the facilities if you need to, have a drink ready and take notes. Justine and I are in the office today, so we're not expecting a fire alarm. Should that go off during the session, we will have to end the call. And likewise, if you're in your workplace and the fire bell goes off, please just follow your fire evacuation procedures. Don't worry about the webinar, we can send you the recording afterwards. So I think that's all the housekeeping I need to go through this. As I said, take notes as we go along. There'll be opportunities to ask questions. Have your camera on or off, it's entirely up to you. For the objectives for today, so it's just really a brief introductory session, as we said. So we're going to be learning about the food groups that make up a healthy diet, discussing recommendations from the Eat Well guide. You may be familiar, anyone that's done any healthy eating workshops before, about the Eat Well plate. So sometimes the Eat Well guide is presented as a plate, but actually we're looking at what people eat over the course of a day or a few days rather than just one particular meal. And lots of cultures and diets don't necessarily use plates, or you may be eating from a lunchbox and so on. And we'll discuss ways that to have a healthy diet whilst on a budget and to make meals more budget friendly. We'll share some practical tips on how to eat well for less, address any barriers to eating on a healthy budget, and we'll signpost you to some additional resources. So the first thing, if you'd like to use a chat function, comment in the chat. So what do you think healthy eating is? What does that mean to you? I'll give you a minute or so if you could just have a think and use the chat function to suggest what you think healthy eating is, or perhaps what it isn't. It'd be lovely to see what you think, so we can sort of clarify an understanding of what we really mean by healthy eating. Could you read out some of the comments in the chat, Justine, so that we can see what sort of things people are suggesting, if that's okay?
Eating a nutritious, balanced diet, varied diet, everything in moderation, vegetables, fruits, meat or meat substitutes, healthy fats, and for example, an example of a poor diet would be a lot of fried food.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you everyone for contributing. I've just noticed another comment saying being aware of portion sizes. I think that is really important. There's a great guide from the British Heart Foundation which goes into portion sizes. We can share that link with you. It's actually quite surprising how much of certain things you should be having, and the right amount of calories every day, not to use snacks for a sugar boost. So it's so easy to do that though, isn't it? So what we're saying is healthy eating is about having a balance of different foods and nutrients in the diet, which I think we've covered. It's not about dieting. It doesn't have to be boring or difficult. and enjoying food, but being mindful of what you eat. So there's lots of things around mindless eating. Perhaps you're watching telly and you're just snacking on chocolates or crisps or unhealthy things, and we do lose track of what we're eating. But actually, if we sit down and have a proper meal or a proper lunch break, I know that's not always easy at work, we can actually be more mindful. We'll taste our food better, eat more slowly, which is better for our digestion. Okay. So rising living costs obviously have made that many of us are trying to make savings where we can, and eating a healthier diet can be hard to do. It's often more tempting to eat what's perceived as more filling foods, which might not be as healthy, or more sort of sugary foods because we want a treat, and the different options that we're trying to stretch our budget can make that more difficult. Let's move on to have a look at the Eat Well guide. So the Eat Well guide comes from the Chief Medical Officer, and it depicts what adults in the UK should be eating. So as you can see, it does look a little bit like a plate, and it's divided into 6 different food groups, which includes fluids, and we'll be exploring. So it doesn't represent what our plate of one meal should look like, but rather what we should be eating over the course of a day or a few days. So we should be eating fruits and vegetables and starchy carbohydrates, such as potatoes, rice and pasta. So everyone that said pasta was a favourite midweek meal, that's where that fits in, into those starchy carbohydrates. And we should eat these fruits, vegetables and starchy carbohydrates in higher quantities, and limit the amounts of unhealthy foods such as fats and oils. And you'll see some of the really unhealthy foods, they're not even on the guide, they're sort of to the side. So these crisps and biscuits and cakes and sauces, down in the bottom left hand corner, they should be eaten much less often in small amounts. So they're not actually part of the overall guide, they're sort of really just as a treat and as an occasional option. So notice how many foods we like are still there, but they're in smaller quantities. So we don't have to get rid of all unhealthy foods. It's okay to have a little bit of cheese, okay to have bread, okay to have cereals, but it's about portion size, as we sort of said when we were discussing what the healthy eating is. So it's more important to focus on the types of food we eat rather than the calories, but it's important in an overall day that we eat roughly the right amount of calories for our activity level. Otherwise, it could contribute to unhealthy weight gain. So as a general rule of thumb, women need about 2,000 calories a day and men 2,500, but that will depend on age, activity levels and other factors. So really encourage you to think more about the quality of the food you're eating and the variety, rather than trying to base your meals around calories. Just make sure you're eating wholesome, healthy meals. Food labels can be really good too in terms of seeing how high in fat and sugar a food is. So try to look for greens on the packaging. As you'll see, the top left corner's got an example of a food label, probably familiar with those on perhaps pre-packed sandwiches or any sort of items purchased in the supermarket. So try to opt for things with more greens and a few oranges. Try to avoid things with too many reds and lots of oranges on that label, and also have a little check to see if it says if it's per serving or per 100 grams. So this one is quite small, I do apologise, it says each serving of 150 grams, but sometimes it will say per cake or per 100 grams, and if it says per 100 grams, you may be eating more than 100 grams in a serving. So it's just worth bearing in mind how much of that product you'll be eating, and if that impacts on sort of the fat and sugar that you'll actually be consuming from that item. So another question for you, if you don't mind using the chat function again for me. So what do we think the benefits are to eating healthily? What about physical benefits, mental benefits? And what maybe we could reduce the risk from if we eat a bit more healthily? Give you a minute to put some ideas in the chat. Did you want to read out any suggestions from the chat, Justine? What sort of things are we saying?
Reduce the chances of type 2 diabetes and reduce the chance of high blood pressure. Just your general health and well-being, can reduce your risk of cancers. You can improve your energy levels and be more alert, less sluggish, feeling better about yourself if you're not overweight, reduce acne, heart health overall is better, along with the risk of diabetes decreasing.
That's great. Thank you so much for contributing, everyone. Anyone that was paying close attention will notice I accidentally clicked and the first suggestion came up. So if you were paying close attention, you'd have noticed that the risk of developing diseases, including diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, stroke and cancer, reduces by us having a healthier diet. Risk of being overweight or obese reduces, and limiting free sugar intake can also reduce our tooth decay. And it also, if we eat a healthy, balanced diet, we don't have such a great risk of having micronutrient deficiencies. So we would be less likely to be deficient from calcium and certain vitamins and so on. So that's why important healthy eating. And then it would also help to improve the growth and cognitive development in children, increases life expectancy and improves quality of life, improves the immune response and ability to fight diseases, strengthens our bones and muscles, helps the digestive system to function well, keeps skin, eyes and teeth healthy, and also improves mood, concentration and energy. And not on this slide, there's also some evidence now around healthy eating, how that benefits sort of the risk of dementia as well. So where that's linked to probably things like higher blood pressure and blood vessels, actually eating healthily isn't just good for our hearts and our bodies, it's good for our brains, it's good for our mental health. So definitely something really important that we can all make a few swaps and just improve our diet that bit more to give us a chance of reducing some of these health risks and improving some of our health outcomes and the quality of life. So some healthy budget-friendly swaps. So fruits and vegetables. We're going to keep this as a practical session as much as possible, as much as you can on a webinar. So we're going to look at some sections of the Eat Well guide in more detail and how we can make that session budget-friendly. So fruits and vegetables make up the biggest portion of the Eat Well guide, but what are the general recommendations for these? So fruits and vegetables give us lots of vitamins and minerals, they're high in fibre, help keep us fuller for longer. I'm sure all of you would have heard the 5 a day recommendation, so we should at least have 5 portions of fruits or vegetables a day. But with fruit juice and smoothies or dried fruits, these should be limited to just 1 serving a day, as these can be high in free sugars. So unfortunately, 5 glasses of fruit juice wouldn't count as your 5 a day, but you could have 150 millilitres of fruit juice as one of your servings. And then obviously you can include other fruits and vegetables with other meals to up your intake. And what we mean by a portion is generally 80 grams for tinned frozen or fresh, 30 grams for dried, and generally it's about a handful. So I've got a couple of satsumas just out of camera shot here. So 1 satsuma, I don't know if you better see it in my background on, but 1 satsuma is not particularly big, but 2 is about a handful, so that would be 1 portion. With larger fruits, you would have like a whole banana would be a portion. So it's just as a guide to have about a handful if you haven't got access to a scales easily. But when using fruits and vegetables in recipes, about 80 grams per person as a serving for tinned, frozen or fresh. So budget ideas, we can buy a frozen tinned fruits and vegetables, make sure they are low or no added sugar or salt. They're absolutely just as healthy as fresh ones, and they can obviously be a bit cheaper and they last longer as well. So if we're on a tight budget, we don't want to risk things going off. Buying some frozen vegetables or fruits can be helpful. Frozen fruits can be used in sort of desserts with some plain yogurt or on top of a cereal. Buying fruits and vegetables which are loose rather than pre-packed can sometimes be cheaper. Obviously some supermarkets don't sell loose items, but if you do look out for them, sometimes they can be a bit cheaper. And also looking at packet sizes, only buying perhaps what you would need for your family rather than some of the sort of bumper packs which might then be wasted. Buying fruits and vegetables which are on offer or in season. There's a few supermarkets that have sort of their bargains of the week selection. And then bulk out your meals with vegetables rather than meat being more expensive. And anyone that's good at gardening or has some outdoor space that's trying to grow your own vegetables can also be sort of a budget-friendly idea to help with saving some money on eating more fruits and vegetables. So our budget-friendly swaps for carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, the second biggest food group in the Eat Well guide. The recommendation they should make up about 1/3 of the food we eat, which is quite high. But if you're eating the right amounts of carbohydrates, then these are nothing to be afraid of. So try to stick to whole grain varieties. And with like the fruits and vegetables, these will keep you fuller up for longer. Try not to have any sort of high sugar variety. So if you are opting for a breakfast cereal, go for a low or no added sugar variety, and be aware that potatoes count as a carbohydrate, not as a fruit or vegetable. And so budget ideas to sort of save money and make these carbohydrates go further. Freeze any leftover bread. If you have a small family or don't eat huge amounts of bread, freezing it away and getting out the slices that you need can help it to last longer. Buying staples of rice, pasta and oats in more bulk quantities if you've got the storage space, so they can be kept for long periods of time. And choose some own brand or everyday essential varieties. They're generally speaking much the same as some of the brand names, can help you save a few pennies. And perhaps try making your own cereal bars. Quite simple to make recipes on sort of websites like Good Food, just using porridge oats and things. And then you've got more control over the sugar content and other bits and pieces that go into them. Healthy food budget swaps for protein. So protein is that pink section of the Eat Well guide. It makes up a much smaller portion, but it's really important food group for eating for growth, repair of muscles and tissues. So plant-based sources contain sources of fibre as well. And many protein sources have lots of vitamins and minerals in them, such as iron and selenium. So as a guide, we should be trying to consume less processed and red meat sources, as these are typically higher in saturated fats, which are the bad fats. So opting for eggs, fish and chicken more often. Try to include some plant-based sources, which are often higher in fibre, and aim to eat 2 portions of fish a week, as these contain essential omega fatty acids, which are important for brain health. So basing our meals around a plant-based protein source rather than meat can help us to make a budget-friendly swap. Buying a whole chicken and using it up in multiple meals, for example, can help that to go further. Or buying some cheaper cuts of meat, sometimes such as drumsticks or thighs. And then choosing frozen and tinned fish varieties is another top tip. So dairy is a really important in the diet source of calcium, helping us to keep our bones strong as we age. You don't need as much of this in your diet as some of the other food groups. So some dairy can be high in fat or sugar, so keep an eye out for varieties which are lower in fat or sugar. Things like yogurts, go back to their food labels and see if they're green, red or orange. And swapping sort of rich custard and creams for creme fraiche or yogurt in recipes where it's possible to do so. We can make sort of budget-friendly swaps by freezing milk that's going to expire, or perhaps making it into something else, so making it into a sauce or something which you can use later on. Again, choosing generic brands rather than branded products, and ensure that you're only eating moderate amounts of cheese and yogurt to help these last longer. Some recipes, or if you have a sandwich with cheese, perhaps grating it can make it go a little bit further than slicing it. And actually, in fact, having going back to portion size, we should only be eating about a matchbox size of cheese, 30 grams a day. So again, weighing things out to help with portion control is really helpful. If you don't have a freezer, there's some good apps out there called Olio and Too Good To Go, so you can sort of share excess food with neighbours or people in your local area. And so, as we say, going down a brand, so choosing some generic brands or some value brands, it's worth having a try. Anyone that's watched the Eat Well for Less show on BBC might spot that I often swap people's brands around and they don't necessarily notice. You could also try making flavoured yogurt from plain yogurt by adding some fruit or honey. And when you next cook a meal, as I said, try and weigh out your portion of cheese to see how much it actually is and that you've got the right amount per person. Fats and oils. So fats is the smallest portion of the Eat Well guide. We don't need to avoid them in the diet, as they can be useful to cook with and add flavour to the meal, but it's also important to use the correct quantities, as they are higher in calories than other food groups. In fact, per 100 grams containing over twice the calories of carbohydrates. Not all fats are bad, some are good and some are bad. This is why the way to tell the unsaturated fats. Good fats are typically liquid at room temperature, so things like vegetable oil, olive oil, oils from seeds. Saturated fats, or what's more known as bad fats, they are solid at room temperature, things like lard, butter, fat from red meat. The way we cook food can also affect how healthy it is. So air frying or grilling can be much healthier than frying in lots of oil. Nuts are also a good source of vitamins and minerals and good fats, but they can be quite high in calories. So it's important that, again, we go back to portion size and eat the recommended portion on the packet. So swap butter for vegetable-based spreads if you can. Choose healthier sources of fats. So eating things like sardines, anchovies and walnuts rather than sort of red meat products, and flavouring meals with spices rather than butter and oils and creams, and just using that same portion, that right portion size again. And then fluids, people often forget that fluids are part of the Eat Well guide, but making sure we drink enough water is really important for all our bodily functions. So the guidance is to have 6 to 8 glasses of fluid per day, but again, this depends on your activity levels and to some degree on the weather. So on a hot day like today, you may find you need to drink more. Try not to have drinks with sugar in. Drinks do count as part of your daily calorie intake, so any calories from drinks can quickly add up without you feeling full up, and much the same applies with alcohol as well. So drinking low sugar drinks such as water or tea, using low fat milk in teas and coffees, and reduce added sugars and syrups, reducing our alcohol consumption. Some ways to make that more budget friendly: we could take a reusable mug or bottle out where you go, so you can, and there's something called the water refill scheme. So many cafes and restaurants will fill up your refillable water bottle for you free of charge. Some coffee shops will give you a little discount if you take your own mug, so those things can help you to reduce your spending. We could swap alcohol for low calorie drinks, which are often cheaper. We could try making our own smoothies using frozen fruits, or perhaps if you've got some leftover fruits in the fridge, avoid wasting them, make them into a smoothie. Or you maybe make tea and coffee in a flask rather than buying it when you're out and about. So a few things where you can save money on drinks. So one of our colleagues in the team, she religiously takes a flask of coffee out wherever she goes because she always fancies a coffee mid-morning. And she worked out that instead of spending about £3 a day, she's actually saving nearly £1,000 a year by taking her flask of coffee out, which is actually quite astounding, really, if you think about £3 every day across the course of the year. So definitely worth thinking about where you can save a few pennies here and there. If you make your tea or coffee at home, you can maybe put less sugar in it. There's lots of sugar and creams in coffees from coffee shops, or you can at least have more control over what's put in it in terms of flavourings. So now we've been talking through the Eat Well guide, we're going to have a think about what healthy eating on a budget might look like practically. Cooking at home is one of the cheapest ways to save money, and it's a good idea to have some meals you can cook that you can put into a meal plan. So we put together a formula that will help you hit the main areas of the Eat Well guide in each meal. There'll be some extras in there to flavour the meal and make sure these are low in sugar and salt. We've got our food group: fruits and vegetables, carbohydrates and protein. So the first option, so we've got tins of tomatoes, vegetables, herbs and spices. Add pasta, add either some tinned fish or pulses topped with low-fat cheese. We've got a lovely tomato pasta. We can make this more budget friendly by using tinned tomatoes or soup. Just be careful with the salt content on the soup. Using frozen vegetables or leftover vegetables that would otherwise go to waste. Can use budget pasta, try to aim for whole grain. And with the protein, we can use tinned mackerel or salmon or anchovies, and make sure we just use the recommended portion of cheese. So the next one, so we've got curry paste in a tin of tomatoes, coconut milk and chickpeas. Add frozen vegetables, add rice, a nice vegetable curry. And the next one, some stir-fry tofu or chicken, herb spices and soy sauce. Again, add some stir-fry or frozen vegetables. Many supermarkets will actually sell a packet of frozen stir-fry vegetables, which can be a bit cheaper than buying all the vegetables separately. Served with rice or noodles, some nice stir-fry noodles. So it can be very simple to do some nice quick midweek meals, and make sure you're including all the food groups and saving yourself some money at the same time. Just going to have a sip of water, bear with me 1 second. So one of the best ways to save money and eat healthy on a budget, and to waste less food as well, because unfortunately the average family wastes about £60 of food a month in the UK, so that's not great for the environment, and it's such a shame to waste that food. So anything we can do to reduce food waste and eat healthy on a budget is well worth doing. So going through your kitchen can be a great way of reducing waste. Food waste is not only bad for the environment, but we're literally throwing money down the drain. So the first thing to do is perhaps go through your fridge, check what ingredients you have and which ones are going to be going off. Write down a list and make sure that you use these up first. Secondly, check the freezer, see if you've got any meals or ingredients in there. If you're going to have a busy week, could you do some quick ready meals, homemade ready meals? Write these on your freezer meal bank and make a meal plan. Put all the ingredients down so that the ingredients that you don't have, to go onto a shopping list. Meal planning can be really daunting and difficult to do at first. If you don't know your work plan, or plans might change through the week, but it can be a useful way to start saving money. So on the next slide, we'll go into a little bit more detail. So having a meal plan can really help you only buy the foods that you need. Once you've established the food you already have and could use in the meal plan, you could put these ingredients into websites such as BBC Good Food or Love Food Hate Waste and find recipes containing ingredients to use these into a meal plan. So try to plan out what you would eat during the week, and this will reduce the urge to impulse buy ready expensive meals and takeaways. Obviously, we don't always know what's going to crop up in the week, so it can be handy to have a couple of things in the store cupboard. Some pasta and tomatoes, as we saw, something that we could rustle up a quick meal if plans go awry, or if you forget to get your chicken out and it's still frozen when you get home from work. So sometimes meal plans will change. Children might not like the food and you might want to cook them something else, or teenagers might want to cook their own food, or you thought you'd have leftovers and you end up having extra guests for dinner and you didn't have as much left as you thought. So it's always good to plan ahead a little bit. So it's not always possible to stick to a meal plan religiously, but just having something basic to start from, a meal plan a bit will help you to sort of save money and maximise the food that you have got. So you can start with a beginner level, maybe just start planning 3 meals a week. If you've done it for a little while, try the whole week. If you're old school, you might like to write it out on a physical table, or there's a number of apps and virtuals or online templates you can use to do your meal plan. Some people might want to do it on a blackboard in the kitchen. And it can be helpful for whoever gets home first in the families and start prepping the dinner when they know what's on the meal plan. As I said, it can be useful to have some backup meals, easy to put together things like eggs on toast or beans on toast in an emergency if things have gone a bit awry that day. There's some healthy, low-cost meal ideas. Here we have some different examples of meals you could try, and we'll send this out afterwards with some more resources. So the top tip is to keep things simple, unless of course you want to make an elaborate 3-course meal for a friend or a dinner party. Otherwise, eating healthy doesn't have to be complicated, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be boring either. Just try to make sure your meals are varied and balanced and that you're getting all the food groups and vitamins and minerals you need to. So here's a few examples. For breakfast, you might have overnight oats soaked with yogurt and frozen fruit. It's a great way to include some fruit with your breakfast as one of your 5 a day. Perhaps boiled eggs and soldiers or sliced toast. Porridge with banana, again adding fruit to your breakfast. Cereal with milk and dried fruit, remembering to keep the portion size to 30 grams for the dried fruit. Or yogurt with tinned or frozen fruit. So plenty of ways with breakfast that we can include some fruit. You might have even eggs on toast with a bit of tomato or avocado to add some veg to your breakfast if you like that. Main meals, we can have vegetable curry using frozen vegetables as a low-cost healthy meal idea. Pasta with tomato sauce or mixed vegetables. Chicken and vegetable stew, shepherd's pie with lentils rather than meat, or perhaps if you do like to have meat, replacing some of the meat with lentils, it helps the meat to go a bit further. And vegetarian fajitas using beans and mushrooms. Again, lots of ways you can incorporate extra vegetables into your main meals. For lunches, wraps and sandwiches, chicken and cheese and salad and hummus, jacket potato, beans, tuna, sweet corn, lots of endless fillings you can put into your jacket potato. If you're working at home or have access to a kitchen in the workday, scrambled eggs or peanut butter, sardines or beans on toast. Soup, homemade or tinned. Again, with tinned, just watch the salt content. If you make it homemade, it can be a great way to use up leftover vegetables. Obviously, this time of year is probably not the best for soup, but certainly salads might be good this time of year with couscous, rice or pasta. So things for snacks where we can have healthy, low-cost meal ideas, breadsticks and hummus or celery sticks or carrot sticks. Fruit and nut butters, popcorn, plain yogurt and fruit, cheese and crackers, vegetable sticks or malt loaf with spread. So lots of things to try and play around with. So just a few examples to get you thinking. If anyone's got any particular ideas of healthy snacks they enjoy during the work day or like to take out and about with them, do share those in the chat with us. It's always great to sort of share ideas with colleagues. If there's any particular healthy meals you enjoy making, we'd love to hear about those as well. I'll come back to the sort of suggested tips in a minute. So just some general healthy eating tips from us as a public health team. So first of all, think about where you shop. Stocking up on essentials from some of the more budget supermarkets or buying cheaper brands. Look out for plastic-free shops which exist in some areas, so you can buy things loose and only the portion size you need. Write a shopping list and stick to it. If you use a weekly meal plan idea and plan out what you've got in the house already and what you need to make those things into meals, it means you can cut down on the amount of shopping you need to do. You won't be buying things that you might not use. So waste nothing. As we said, the average family with children throws away about £60 of good food every month. Be strict about buying only what you actually eat and eating up everything that you've got. Fall in love with your freezer. So frozen fruits to vegetables sometimes come pre-chopped and ready to use and can be cheaper than fresh varieties. Things like butternut squash can be quite difficult to prepare. And you might worry about wasting it when you've peeled it because they're difficult. But if you buy a frozen bag, very much a similar price to a fresh one, and you can just put it into the recipe and use all of it. If there's anything that you can't finish in time, freeze it. Embrace your leftovers. Once you've built up some recipes to your repertoire and you're confident in making them, leftovers can become something to look forward to, having leftovers for lunch or serving them with a different side or freezing them away and having them another time. And cooking from scratch, saving money by cutting back on takeaways. Preparing and cooking your own meals is generally cheaper than buying a takeaway or a ready meal, and often healthier because you've got more control over the fat, salt and sugar content. And think about using a different cooking method as well. Could you use a smaller oven or an air fryer, cheaper than a conventional oven? And cooking from scratch as well can be a great family activity at the weekend involving children. Great life skills for them and just a nice way to spend time together. So other tips we've got: being aware of offers, special discounts such as buy one, get one half price can offer good value, but only buy the items you actually need and are likely to keep and use, or perhaps we're going to buy anyway. Children eating the same. If you have a toddler or a young child, get them used to eating the same meals as you. Try not to add any salt to their portions and just watch the portion size so it's suitable for them. Being careful with spicy food. Cheap doesn't have to mean less tasty. There are plenty of websites offering recipes for cheaper meals using leftover ingredients such as Change for Life, BBC Good Food and Love Food Hate Waste. And eat smaller nutrient-dense portions. So by saying no to a second helping or using a smaller plate, lots of our dinner plates we get in the supermarkets now are much bigger than they perhaps would have been in the 1950s or 60s. And actually having a smaller plate, you're less likely to dish up more. And you still probably just feel as satisfied. So make sure you're only eating what you need. Try weighing out or measuring your staples when cooking, and just think about your portion size. And as I said, there's the British Heart Foundation guide, which we can share in the follow-up from this session. And then consider where you can multitask. So if you have put the oven on, obviously cost of energy is much more expensive than we've been used to. Could you put some other things in at the same time? So some vegetables, or cook some meat to use another day. Could you use your leftover pasta water for something such as making a stock or boiling eggs? So there's lots of things we can do to save a little bit of energy. So when we do put the oven on, it's full up, especially this time of year when it's very hot indoors. You don't want the oven on too often. So if you can cook perhaps 2 or 3 meals one day and then have things with salad over the next couple of days, it can help save that bit of energy as well. Do any tips in the chat, Justine, sort of healthy tips that people have shared that I haven't covered already?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, that's great. So we'll just have a look at the potential barriers. So we talked about the recommendations and how we can practically do these things, but there obviously are a number of barriers that might stop us from healthy eating. So what other barriers do we think there could be to healthy eating? Would anyone like to suggest things into the chat for me? So what sort of suggestions have we got?
The barriers are finances, having low finances, stress, not having enough time, and fussy eaters. Oh, and also food intolerances, time, and having to purchase local because of no transport to bigger supermarkets.
That's a good point. Sometimes those corner shops can be quite expensive and limited in choice. And yeah, I think time and family is definitely a big barrier for people. Thank you for contributing, everyone. So we'll have a look at some of the common barriers. So people don't know enough healthy recipes. So we can look on websites and for inspiration. There are lots of apps out there. Start small, try out one new recipe a week and build up from there, build your confidence and sort of practice of a bit of a variety, swapping out ingredients or trying a pasta sauce with different things in it. Keep an eye out in our newsletter from the Healthy Workplace programme. Sometimes we'll have a recipe shared in that for you. If you don't know how to prepare certain recipes or foods, there's lots of great videos on YouTube, Instagram and so on. Try a new meal for yourself before you cook it for others, and ask a friend if they want to come for dinner and make it together, or perhaps if you have a dessert, have your friend come with a dessert and you make the main course, and then you can swap over if you go back to their house. If you don't find much time to cook, try and keep meals simple with minimal preparation. Prepare meals in advance if you have space in your freezer and time to do a bit of batch cooking or meal prep at weekends or on your day off. And use a slow cooker, which can be on whilst you are out. So making your goals smart. So have a think about how you can maybe make a few changes to improve your healthy eating on a budget. So for example, for the next month, I will try one new recipe a week, or I will do my food shop on a Monday and cook a recipe from the BBC Food on a Wednesday when I have the afternoon off work. So just some food result for you to think about what you might be able to do differently for yourselves. So just as a quick wrap up, so the Eat Well Guide recommends certain food groups in certain amounts we should have each week. To make it budget friendly, think about our meal choices, ingredients and preparation methods, and that can also help it to be more cost effective. And to eat well, we recognise that barriers prevent us from doing so and try to think of ways to address these. And remember, small changes add up. So for example, if you don't live near a supermarket and you rely on a local shop, perhaps you can bulk buy on a monthly trip to a supermarket or pay for a delivery once a month and just use the local shop to sort of top up from, or look out for offers in the local shop. Sometimes local shops will be more amenable to sort of getting things in for local regular customers. So going back to the chat function again, if I could have people to suggest one thing they might try this week that will help them to eat well for less. I'll just give you a minute to have a think about that and type your messages. What sort of suggestions have we got, Justine?
Quite a few people have said that they'd like to do better meal planning, getting the family together for their meals, trying new recipes, and double checking in the fridge to see what there is left and building the recipe around that.
Yeah, it always, those sort of things always remind me. Does anyone remember Ready Steady Cook back in the day, where they'd have a bag of ingredients and the chef would have to make something? It's almost like playing Ready Steady Cook at home and get some things out the fridge and see what you can rustle up with it. And then, as we said, the Love Food, Hate Waste and Good Food websites are really good. If you've got a particular ingredient to use up, you can use their recipe finder and search for things to use it. So yeah, do build up your confidence. Thank you everyone for your contributions there. Is there anything else to add there, Justine, or am I right to move on?
Yep. Making your own smoothies and working on the portion sizes.
Oh yeah, they're really great ideas as well. Thank you, everyone. So just a slide of resources here. We will send these out, so don't worry about noting them down now or panicking. These, if we send you the slides, you're able to click on them and take you to the right websites. So lots of resources around healthy eating on a budget, some different meal planning tools. The apps I mentioned are Olio or Too Good to Go, so they're available to save money. So lots of food providers or local people will share excess food they've got. Too Good to Go do something called a magic bag. So some local bakeries and so on will sell off leftover bread at the the end of the day for sort of, and you can purchase a bag, I think it's sort of £2 or £3, and you can go and collect that bread that would have gone to waste. You can freeze it and use it over a period of time. Olio, again, it's some supermarkets, some corner shops, or just some local people. Maybe you've got a glut of tomatoes in the garden that you don't want to waste. You can advertise those locally through that app. Lots of information from different websites there, so do check those out. We'll send out our lunch recipe cards. They're very sort of introductory, but they might get you started on some ideas of healthy lunch recipes you could start to build on, and there's lots of great resources from the NHS as well. So that's it for this session. What I'll do is I'll stop recording in case anyone wants to ask any questions before we finish up for this afternoon. Are there any? Feel free to either